In September 1965, CBS aired an idea so strange that network executives themselves questioned whether it would survive its first season. A comedy set inside a Nazi prisoner of war camp. Laughter inside a Stalag. Bumbling German guards. A theme song you could hum in your sleep. What audiences never knew was this. The actors playing the two most German villains on that set had lost family members to the very regime they were mocking. One young Frenchman on the cast had a number tattooed on his arm. And the leading man, beloved by millions, would end his life in a way no one watching at home could have imagined.
This is the story CBS never put in the credits. Here's what really happened behind the wire of Stalag 13.
Every network passed on the concept at first. A sitcom? Set in a WW2 POW camp? Where the prisoners run circles around their captors? In 1965, just 20 years after the liberation of the camps, it sounded like a disaster waiting to happen. But nobody knew what happened next. The pilot, once it screened, would win over not just CBS, but the very people the network feared it would offend most all. Creators Bernard Fine and Albert S. Ruddy built the premise around a POW camp, where the prisoners secretly ran an Allied sabotage operation under the noses of their guards. Before signing on, star Bob Crane insisted the studio send an unfinished cut of the pilot, without a soundtrack or laugh track, to veterans groups across the Midwest for their reaction. According to accounts from Crane's biographers, the response stunned everyone involved. Veterans said humor was exactly what had carried them through the war, and Crane's hesitation disappeared. The production, however, carried a shadow almost no one in the audience ever noticed. Years later, the truth finally came out in a federal courtroom. The writers of the 1951 Broadway play Stalag 17, itself written by two actual former prisoners of war, Donald Bevan and Edmund Trzynski, sued Bing Crosby Productions, the show's production company, for copyright infringement. Bevan and Trzynski claimed they had pitched CBS a television series based on their own play back in 1963, only to watch a strikingly similar show appear 2 years later. A jury actually sided with the playwrights. But in a rare move, the presiding federal judge overruled the verdict, ruling there was a, quote, striking difference in the dramatic mood of the two works. One grim, one played for laughs. The case became a cornerstone of American entertainment copyright law, cited for decades afterward. Interior sets, Klink's office, the barracks, the tunnels, were built on Desilu Studios in Hollywood, later renamed Paramount Studios, and then Cinema General Studios as the show changed hands over its run. But every outdoor shot, every snow-covered German forest, was filmed on the legendary 40 acres backlot in Culver City, the same patch of land used for Gone with the Wind and the Andy Griffith Show. The show was set in a permanent, frozen German winter. It was filmed every single season in the Southern California heat. Cast members wore full wool coats and Germanic uniforms while sweating through takes, with production crews reportedly packing the snow from bleached cornflakes and gypsum during outdoor shoots, a trick common to studio backlots of the era.
Bob Crane didn't come from comedy. He came from radio. Before Hollywood ever knew his name, Crane was one of the most successful disc jockeys in Los Angeles, hosting a KNX radio show so popular that guests reportedly included Marilyn Monroe, Bob Hope, and future President Ronald Reagan. CBS noticed his charisma and moved him into television as a guest star before ever considering him a lead. The audition that almost didn't happen. Crane wasn't immediately sold on the Hogan's Heroes concept. According to accounts preserved by his family and biographers, It was only after reading the script and meeting with producer Edward H. Feldman that he agreed to test for the role. On December 22, 1964, Crane did a screen test opposite Werner Klemperer, and the chemistry, by every account, was instant. He was offered the role of Colonel Hogan on the spot and filmed the pilot in January 1965. Crane earned 2 Emmy nominations for the role, but never won.
What the cameras never captured was the man behind Colonel Hogan, living a startlingly different double life. Crane had married his high school sweetheart, Anne Terzian, in 1949, and the couple had 3 children. But years into the marriage, Crane began an affair with co-star Cynthia Lynn, who played the camp secretary, Helga. When Lynn left the series, she was replaced by another actress using the stage name Sigrid Valdis, and Crane's next relationship began with her. He divorced Terzian in 1970, just before their 21st wedding anniversary, and married Valdis that same year. After Hogan's Heroes ended in 1971, Crane appeared in 2 Disney family films, Superdad and Gus, and starred in the short-lived NBC series The Bob Crane Show. He kept working steadily in dinner theater across the country. How his life ended, a respectful account. On June 29, 1978, Bob Crane was found dead in a guest condominium in Scottsdale, Arizona, where he had been performing in the stage play Beginner's Luck. He was 49 years old. According to police and later journalistic investigations, Crane had been struck with a blunt object, believed by investigators to be a camera tripod, and an electrical cord was found around his neck. There was no sign of forced entry. A co-star who had lunch plans with Crane that day, actress Victoria Berry, went to check on him when he didn't show up and discovered his body. In the years that followed his death, Crane's private life became public in a way that reshaped how Hollywood and the country remembered him. Investigators discovered an extensive personal video collection documenting his relationships with numerous women, a hobby he shared with his close friend, video equipment salesman John Henry Carpenter. Suspicion fell on Carpenter almost immediately, but it would take until 1994, 16 years later, for him to stand trial. He was found not guilty, and the murder remains officially unsolved to this day. Crane's own son, Robert Crane, later wrote a memoir, Crane, Sex, Celebrity, and My Father's Unsolved Murder, 2015, reflecting on growing up as the child of a beloved TV star whose death became a national scandal. Hollywood's reaction at the time was one of shock and near total silence. A violent, unsolved murder was almost unheard of for a star of Crane's stature, and it cast a long shadow over how Hogan's Heroes reruns were discussed for years afterward. Fans, many of whom only knew Crane as the wisecracking Colonel Hogan, were left to reconcile the wholesome image with a case straight out of true crime. He is buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, not far from other stars of his era. Despite the tragedy of his ending, Bob Crane is still remembered today as the actor who took a genuine risk on an almost unthinkable premise and made it work. Of every hidden story behind Hogan's Heroes, none is more staggering than that of John Banner, the actor who played the bumbling, lovable Sergeant Schultz, the guard whose catchphrase, "I know nothing, nothing," became one of the most quoted lines of 1960s television. Banner was born in 1910 to a Jewish family in what was then Austria-Hungary. He studied law at the University of Vienna before turning to acting. In 1938, while touring with a theater troupe in Switzerland, Adolf Hitler annexed Austria in the Anschluss. Banner could not go home. Multiple members of his family did not survive the Holocaust that followed. He emigrated to the United States, unable to speak a word of English, and, according to accounts from entertainment journalists of the era, learned the language phonetically while working as a master of ceremonies. In a bitter irony that even Banner himself acknowledged in interviews, his trim build and accent initially typecast him as a Nazi villain in wartime Hollywood films, playing the very kind of men who had murdered his relatives. By the time Hogan's Heroes cast him as Schultz in 1965, Banner had gained significant weight for the role, reportedly weighing close to 280 pounds during the series, a physical transformation that helped make the softer, non-threatening Schultz believable to audiences. He became one of the show's most beloved characters, specifically because Schultz was written and performed as fundamentally decent, a guard who quietly chose to see nothing rather than turn in the prisoners he'd grown fond of. Banner, along with fellow castmates Klemperer and Bob Crane, co-starred in a 1968 feature film, The Wicked Dreams of Paula Schultz. It was, by most accounts, a box office failure, and the trio returned to the security of their hit series without missing much momentum. A quiet ending on his own birthday. After Hogan's Heroes ended in 1971, Banner starred in a short-lived follow-up sitcom, The Chicago Teddy Bears, playing a similarly bumbling gangster. It was canceled after just 13 episodes. Banner then retired to France with his wife. While visiting friends in his native Vienna in January 1973, he suffered a burst abdominal aortic aneurysm. He died in Vienna's Sophia Hospital on January 28, 1973, his 63rd birthday. He is buried in the Vienna cemetery of Mauer,
the same city he had once been forced to flee. Fans who later learned Banner's real history often describe it as recontextualizing the entire series. A man who lost family to the Nazis, spending 6 seasons making millions of Americans laugh at the people who had done it. If there is one piece of hidden history that changes how audiences see this show forever, it's this. The actor who played the show's central Nazi villain was Jewish and had fled the Nazis himself. Werner Klemperer was born in Cologne, Germany in 1920, the son of the world-famous conductor Otto Klemperer. When Adolf Hitler rose to power, the Klemperer family fled Germany. Werner was still a teenager. He eventually settled in the United States, served in the U.S. Army during the war, and built a respected stage and film career, appearing in Stanley Kramer's Judgment at Nuremberg before ever putting on Colonel Klink's uniform. The casting secret few fans know. Klemperer almost turned the role down entirely. By his own account, his agent initially failed to tell him the role was written to be comedic. Klemperer assumed he was being offered a serious dramatic villain. Once he understood the tone, he set his own condition before accepting the job. He stated plainly that he had one qualification for taking the role. If the writers ever scripted an episode where Colonel Klink came out looking like a hero, he would quit the show on the spot. The producers agreed, and Klink remained, every episode, an oblivious fool who never won. Werner Klemperer died of cancer on December 6, 2000, at his home in New York City. He was 80 years old. His body was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean. Obituaries at the time noted that discussion of a Hogan's Heroes feature film had been shelved not long before his death, amid renewed public debate over whether a Nazi camp comedy could or should ever be revived for a modern audience. Klemperer's own reflections on that criticism, given shortly before he died, remain some of the most thoughtful public commentary any cast member gave on the show's legacy. Richard Dawson, born Colin Lionel M. in Gosport, England in 1932, lived a genuinely extraordinary life before ever setting foot on the Hogan's Heroes set. At just 14 years old, he ran away from home to join the British Merchant Marines, reportedly lying about his age to avoid mistreatment and boxing to earn extra money during his service. Dawson played Corporal Peter Newkirk, the camp's resident pickpocket, tailor, and master of disguise, for the show's full 6-season run. It was his American breakthrough. Afterward, he became a regular performer on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, and in 1973, producer Mark Goodson brought him on as a panelist on Match Game, where his sharp, off-the-cuff wit made him a fan favorite for over 1,000 episodes. That popularity led Goodson to install Dawson as the original host of Family Feud in 1976. It became one of the most successful game shows in American television history, and Dawson became inseparable from a signature habit: kissing female contestants on the cheek before they played. He earned the nickname the Kissing Bandit, a habit that drew both audience affection and criticism, including reported friction with the show's executive producer over the gesture. Dawson maintained that the tradition began almost by accident. When one nervous female contestant froze trying to name a green vegetable, he kissed her cheek to calm her, and the moment became a signature. Richard Dawson died on June 2nd, 2012, at Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles, from complications of esophageal cancer. He was 79. Tributes from the television industry emphasized both halves of his career, as a Hogan's Heroes cast member and as arguably the most quotable game show host of his era. He is buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, the same cemetery as his former co-star, Bob Crane. Ivan Dixon played Staff Sergeant James Kinch Kinchlow, the communications expert who could impersonate German officers over the radio, and was one of very few black actors with a regular starring role on primetime American television in the mid-1960s. Dixon had already built a respected career before the show, starring in the acclaimed independent drama Nothing But a Man, 1964, a film he considered the proudest work of his career, and appearing on Broadway alongside Sidney Poitier in A Raisin in the Sun. Poitier, in fact, had personally used Dixon as his stunt double years earlier on the 1958 film The Defiant Ones, later saying of Dixon, he was quite likely to walk off with the scene. Dixon was also, from the start of his Hogan's Heroes run, an active civil rights figure, serving as president of the organization Negro Actors for Action. He was known for turning down roles he considered stereotypical, once stating publicly, "This is the most powerful medium operating in the world today, and we must have access to it to discuss our problems and concerns." After 5 seasons, Dixon made the decision to leave Hogan's Heroes, reportedly feeling his character had been underused over the course of the series. It was, by most measures, a bold move. Walking away from a hit network sitcom rarely benefits an actor's career. For Dixon, it opened an entirely new one. He transitioned into directing, a skill he had absorbed on the Hogan's Heroes set, and helmed the acclaimed blaxploitation-era drama The Spook Who Sat by the Door, 1973, which he also starred in. He went on to direct episodes of The Waltons, Starsky and Hutch, The Rockford Files, Magnum P.I., and In the Heat of the Night, building one of the more substantial directing resumes of any actor to emerge from a 1960s sitcom. He was honored with 4 NAACP Image Awards and the Paul Robeson Pioneer Award from the Black American Cinema Society. Dixon later left Hollywood altogether, purchasing and operating a radio station, KONI-FM, in Maui, Hawaii, before health concerns led him to sell it in 2002. Ivan Dixon died on March 16, 2008, in Charlotte, North Carolina, from a brain hemorrhage connected to complications of kidney disease. He was 76. He was survived by his wife of over 50 years,
Burley Ray, whom he had met as a fellow college theater student. His daughter told reporters at the time that while he was proudest of his dramatic work, he did have some personal issues with being remembered primarily for a sitcom role, but understood its cultural significance, given how few black actors held regular series roles on American television at that time.
Larry Hovis, who played the explosives expert, Sergeant Andrew Carter, brought a genuine warmth to the ensemble that castmates and critics alike often singled out. After the series, Hovis moved into writing and producing for television, including work behind the scenes on Hee Haw. He died of cancer in September 2003 in San Marcos, Texas, at age 67, a death that, by multiple contemporary accounts, went almost unnoticed amid heavier news coverage of other celebrity deaths that same week. Leon Askin, the Vienna-born actor who played the blustering General Burkhalter, was, like Klemperer and Werner, a Jewish performer who had fled Nazi-controlled Europe. He lived to 97, passing away on June 3, 2005, making him the longest-lived member of the principal cast's German officer trio. Howard Kane, who played the sinister Gestapo Major Hochstetter, died on December 28, 1993, at age 65. Notably, contemporary press coverage of the show's DVD box set releases has repeatedly pointed out the same striking irony. Of the actors playing the camp's German antagonists, Klemperer, Werner, and Askin, all three were Jewish performers who had personally fled the Nazi regime, while Robert Clary, playing one of the Allied prisoners, was a concentration camp survivor. It's a detail that television historians and Jewish cultural organizations alike have written about as one of the most quietly remarkable behind-the-scenes facts in American sitcom history.
The show's premise drew consistent criticism throughout its run, and long after. The idea that a comedy could be built around a Nazi-run POW camp struck many critics and commentators as inherently tasteless, regardless of how the show handled it. When talk of a theatrical Hogan's Heroes film briefly circulated in the late 1990s, that same criticism resurfaced in national newspaper columns, and the project was ultimately shelved. Werner Klemperer, who spent much of his later life defending the show's intentions, remained a thoughtful voice on the subject until his death, consistently drawing the line between mocking incompetent guards and making light of the Holocaust itself, a line the show's creators and cast, many of whom had personal reasons to care deeply about that distinction, insisted they never crossed. The show also never received a true series finale. Its final broadcast episode ended with the Allies storming the camp and capturing Colonel Klink, with Hogan pulling a gun to stop his own capture. The fate of the characters left entirely open, with no closure for a series that had run 6 seasons and 168 episodes.
That is the legacy hiding behind 6 seasons of laugh tracks and slapstickists. And it's a legacy far more complicated and far more human than anything that ever made it onto CBS. Which hidden story surprised you the most? Which member of the cast do you miss most? And which classic show should we investigate next?